sending Drew Holiday to Portland for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round draft picks.
Breaking news out of the association surrounding the Boston Celtics.
The Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks.
50 for Jaylen Brown. This is Pritchard time. The crowd can sense it. Over 3 Bulls.
Great in and out dribble. Oh! He set off the smoke detector.
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtics source on this Tuesday evening here. The Celtics are coming off of definitely a rough one in Detroit. Definitely a lot of positives to take away from that one as well, right? It came down to the last shot. Jaylen Brown did miss it after it bounced off the rim a couple of times. But that being said, you lose by 1 to the best team in the Eastern Conference without Jason Tatum, obviously, without, really any shooting besides Jaylen Brown. Derrick White continues to struggle, and I want to spend a lot of the show talking about Derrick White. We're going to keep this pretty short as it is a live bonus episode here. We're going to go just about 20-25 minutes here. And we're going to talk about Derrick White and what's going on with his struggles over the last, many months now at this point, really the whole season. We're also going to do a little reaction to the just very disappointing, from a league standpoint, the injury to Jimmy Butler, right? Like, as a Celtics fan, yeah, it probably doesn't bother me as much. It's just natural to not like the Warriors. But that being said, it's just bad for the league, and you want a good product out there because it helps everyone, right? And then, at the end of the show, we'll talk a little All-Stars as they were announced, I believe, yesterday. Jaylen Brown, obviously, an All-Star starter for the first time in his career, but we'll go over that later. I want to start the show with the Jimmy Butler news. And, it happened last night, sort of midway through the second quarter. The Warriors go on to win that game, actually, 132-112 against the Heat. And the Warriors have been hot over the last, 3 or so weeks. Last 16 games, really. They're 12-4. They looked like they had sort of turned the corner. Jonathan Kuminga situation continues to still be a factor, and we're going to talk about that later. But that being said, they've been performing well. Jimmy Butler had been great in the minutes where Steph was off the floor, and obviously Steph Curry continues to just play at a just championship level at age 37. But, Jimmy Butler, sort of how it happened, he goes up and he catches this sort of post pass on the right block right underneath the basket. And he took a little minor bump in the air. And, NBA players, get that bump each and every single time they do something like that. I think it was from Davion Mitchell. But nothing, extreme about that bump. A normal just, trying to contest the pass in. And, he lands awkwardly on that sort of side of his knee and sort of tears it right there. And just a freak injury that, is just super frustrating for a team that, basically, was spinning in circles for a lot of the year, but it looked like maybe they had a chance to turn their season around. And basically, this game just puts a, sort of the grave on top of the hole, if you know what I mean. Like, it took a season that was already struggling, for the most part, right? Overall, the overall season has been a struggle for the Warriors despite their last, 16 games or whatever, which is a good chunk of the season for sure. But, it's coming against teams that, maybe are not as, primed to make a championship run. Some of the lower teams down in the bottom of the league, and they had a rough start to the season with the schedule, a lot of road games, and they turned it around coming back home. But they hadn't been able to quite fix their problems on the road. But basically, the Warriors, as I said end up winning the game. And they put it away with, 2 runs, probably one in the sort of midway through the third quarter, right after, the injury. Steph and Podziemski sort of sparked it. And Podziemski was very good in this game. He scored 24 points. He's been on a recent heater, scoring 19 points per game over the last 4 games, 11 for 21 from 3 in that stretch, right? And he sort of took on the role that he needed to be a offensive player for the team, and he did that in that game. But that game, was very much filled on adrenaline from the injury. Whether he's going to be able to fill Jimmy Butler's role is probably something that's not going to happen, most likely if you are the Warriors, right? And then, in the fourth quarter of this game, Podziemski just, completely took over the game. He had a pump fake to get Wiggins to jump into the air, and then Wiggins fouled him, right? So some crafty moves from him. He had a tough driving layup through traffic as well, right? Some very, championship level MVP type guard performances from Podziemski in this game. Step back threes in both corners. I think he had one in the right corner and then in the left corner as well. He had a couple step backs, one that put the Warriors up 24, which basically ended the game at that point. But as I said, this injury is the final piece of their just, very ups and down, mediocre season. And, they could still hang around the 8th seed, play in maybe the 6th seed area. I don't think they'll fall out. I think there's, Steph Curry is just, talented enough to keep them in games. But that being said, you're not going to be able to win a first-round series, let alone 2, right? We talked about their brutal schedule early, but now you look at this team and, getting into a series in any playoff situation, especially if you're down in the 8th seed and you have to win play-in games, going up against the Thunder or maybe the Nuggets with Jokic back, it's going to be very hard for this team to do anything, substantial. And, that basically seals the deal. Because Jimmy Butler's out for this season and now he's going to be out, maybe he'll be back by the start of the season. My guess is he'll miss, a month or 2. We'll see. Who knows? Especially at age 37, it's going to take him longer to heal is my guess. But that puts him at 38. And at that point, I don't know how much you're getting out of Jimmy Butler anymore. Just because, he is already declining in his production and his athleticism. And now, he still has nights where he's a championship level, and the team has been great with him on the court without Steph. But both those guys are, past their prime at this point. We'll see how much longer they play, but my guess is that this run for the Warriors is officially over with this. Or when I say this run, this era with Steph Curry is officially over with this Jimmy Butler injury. And who knows, they can put some younger pieces, some young defensive guards around Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler next season. But they're pretty high in the salary cap situation. It's going to be very hard for them to make trades and whatever. And you still have the Jonathan Kuminga situation looming over their head. And if you're at this point, right, they haven't been able to find a trade. He has to be off the team for really anything to work, just because the mood around it and the situation has gotten so out of hand. But that being said, maybe he plays over the next couple weeks. It'd be wise for Steve Kerr to put him in, see what you can get out of him. Maybe that gets some more buyers on the table and gets you in a better situation to make a trade at the deadline. Because right now there are no buyers, and more than likely than not, he's going to be on this team, and that's going to continue to eat into any sort of success that the Warriors might have. But yeah, that's enough on this situation. Just to recap, it's just unfortunate injury news. It's not a quote-unquote non-contact injury, but because there was a little bit of a bump from Davion Mitchell, but it is, one that was not, forced upon by any opponent. It was very just freak accidents that are just occurring more and more in the NBA right now. I think it's the pace of play, the athleticism, some of these guys that are 7 feet tall and they're running around like point guards. It just, injuries are starting to pop up more and more. And, hopefully the technology and, medical situation continues to get better in the world. But that being said, I think injuries are going to continue to be on the rise. But yeah, let's move on to Derrick White and why, the Celtics are struggling in games like the Pistons games. For the most part, Jaylen Brown has just played at such a high enough level to carry this team throughout the season. But there are games like last night where Jaylen Brown has it going for the most part. I didn't think that he was the reason they lost it anyway. Yes, he does miss the final buzzer beater, but that being said, it's a 50-50 shot, and I thought he got a good look. And quite frankly, with 4 seconds left, that's not enough time to set up an actual offensive, 24-second set, right? And so the game came down to earlier in the game when the Celtics just could not make shots. And you can go check out my instant reaction that I think it uploaded earlier this morning. For some reason, it didn't upload right after the game, but I think it came out around 7 o'clock this morning, so you can go check that out. We react to the entire game. I recorded it right after the game, so it is an instant reaction with my thoughts on the game. We talked about Derrick White, talked about Jaylen Brown, but I wanted to take the time right now to just, look at his stats from last season compared to this season. And quite frankly, obviously you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both last season, and that, affects Derrick White's number. But, you look at this season, and I'm reading right from the box scores for this season, his averages per game, right? Obviously, he goes from playing, just about 34 minutes to, a little over 34 minutes in 34.2. So not a big difference there. Jaylen Brown's really been the one that's played the most, minutes in terms of a jump from the previous season to now. And he is scoring more points, but, almost a point and a half. I think it's a point and a third, 16.4 to 17.7 this year. But obviously that's coming because he's taking more shots, right? And he has to take more shots with the talent that he has around him. And he's doing so on just a extreme drop in efficiency. He went from making last season, if I'm not mistaken, he shot 44.2% on field goals. This season he's down to 39.1, so almost 5 or more than 5 percentage drop there. On threes last season he was at 38.4 and he's down to 32.4, and that's the biggest difference right now. Because, yes, the field goals overall is rough, but that field goal percentage is coming from him having a 6-point drop in 3-point shooting. And he's known for his 3-point shooting, right? That's one of his greatest attributes that he can bring to a game each and every night, besides his defense, which, by the way, continues to be elite, right? The reason he's out there playing 34 minutes a night, even on a night like the Pistons game where he plays 37 minutes and struggles mightily, but you needed him out there off defensively, right? You couldn't have survived that game maybe without Derrick White, and so you're forced to play him, and, when he's not shooting the ball well and it's already a great defensive battle like it was last night, you can't survive those games. And Jaylen Brown did the best he could late in that game to carry the offense, but it just wasn't enough. And one of the reasons why I think Derrick White is struggling as much as he is, I don't think it's because of the, pressure and attention that he's getting, because quite frankly, right, Jaylen Brown is getting the same amount of attention as last year, actually probably more attention than he is last year, and he's just excelled to another level. There's something mechanically going on with Derrick White. It's not his confidence. I don't think it's anything like that. It's something about the way that, maybe it's not even mechanically, but it's something about the way they're getting him the ball versus last year. He doesn't have the ball as much in his hands as he might have last year. Jaylen Brown's been bringing the ball up a lot. Anthony Simons, when he's on the court, Peyton Pritchard, who's been starting, has brought the ball up. And that's worked, for the most part, well for Pritchard. He's had his ups and downs as well this season. But for the most part, when Peyton Pritchard is initiating the play, Jaylen Brown, or Peyton Pritchard has played well. And he shot the ball well. But Derrick White doesn't have the ball in his hands anymore. And I think that's the biggest change, because you're taking a guy that is used to bringing the ball up, making the plays, facilitating. Even for Jason Tatum, Derrick White would still bring the ball up. And now Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard have most of that ball handling, responsibility. And Derrick White isn't used to that role. He's not used to just being a, come around screens and catch and shoot guy. He's more of a shooter off the dribble. And, he's not like a Sam Hauser coming around screens and just hitting threes. He's not used to catching it in that position and turning and having to shoot threes like that. He's not used to, sort of setting screens for other guys. That's not been his role. And I think, he just isn't a player that, is suitable to that kind of offense. And, I think that'll change when Jason Tatum's back, of course. But for the most part, this production from him is really hurting the team. We talked about last night, you had games against the Pacers where he couldn't shoot well when Jaylen Brown didn't play, and he was the center of the attention offensively. And, the Pacers just doubled him, and he, couldn't get his shot going, didn't have the ability to pass out of it either. That was a massive struggle from him as well. It's just something to keep an eye on him. As the season goes on, we're already halfway through the season more at this point. It's not something that I think is going to change, this season the way it is, right? When you change the lineups and you bring Jason Tatum back in, maybe things change like that. I don't think this is, something that's just going to change on his own. And I'm sure he, tweaks his shot mechanics every single day at this point, trying to see what he can fix. And if I'm Derrick White, I would continue to work on that, but I don't think that's gonna change much. All right, I do want to quickly talk about the upcoming or the starters that were announced for the All-Star game in Los Angeles. Everyone knows it's a weird format this year, the USA versus World, basically the last chance for the NBA to see if they can get anything right about the All-Star game. I've said this before. I would just name the All-Star games and then just name the All-Stars and then just give them the week off. Or maybe, you hold the events and stuff, but you don't have the actual All-Star game on that Sunday. That's my idea, because I just don't think it's going to work. Players don't want to ever put in the work and effort. And this is basically the last chance that they have to get it right. But that being said, they named it not in a a 3-team thing with 2 USA and 1 World. They named it East versus West. And here are the starters. From the East, you have Jaylen Brown. This is from left to right. Jaylen Brown, Cade Cunningham, Giannis, Jalen Brunson, and Tyrese Maxey. And then from the West, you have SGA, Steph Curry, Luka, Wemby, and Jokic. Funny enough, 4 out of the 5 starters from the East are American, and 4 out of the 5 starters from the West are international. So much international talent in the Western Conference right now, which makes it just an extremely difficult conference to play in. And for the most part, I agree with these selections. Funny enough, this is, I think, the first time in 20 years that LeBron James is not an all-star starter, and quite frankly, he doesn't deserve to be. Steph Curry, definitely deserves to be. I still think, he'll make the all-star game, LeBron James, from fan vote and from media and player popularity. I think he'll still make it as a reserve. just out of respect for the love and the dedication he's put for this game. But by no means do I think that on his merit of this season he should be in the All-Star game, and that might be a controversial take for sure. But that's just my thoughts that he hasn't done enough. The team is really struggling right now. They have dropped to, if I'm not mistaken, believe they're now 4th in the Western Conference, or maybe 5th now in the Western Conference. They are, just 9 games over 500. They are, they are 6th in the Western Conference, 1 game out of the, or 1 spot out of the 7th seed. They have a negative point differential. And Luka obviously has been fantastic, and he deserves an All-Star spot. But the Lakers have just not been able to put it together, basically due to their lack of athleticism, their age, and the fact that you have 3 players that don't play much defense at this point, in LeBron James, Luka, and Austin Reeves. And Austin Reeves is your best defender out of those guys, and he's still not a great defender. But that being said, I do think that he will make it, as I said, and I don't think he'll be leading the charge or anything. He probably won't play like he did last year. But yeah, just to wrap up the show, with just a little bit of thought on his career, right? Obviously, he's a 4-time champion. I don't think this is his last year in anything. If it is, I think he plays Cleveland either tonight or maybe it's tomorrow, some point, as part of, it would be a sort of little, farewell ceremony probably. I'm sure they're going to hang his number in Cleveland, if not Los Angeles, retire his number from both arenas, maybe even the Heat as well. I mean, he's just had a fantastic career. I'm not going to put the debate on, 1 versus 2 greatest player of all time, but he's up there for sure. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back with an instant reaction after Wednesday's Celtics game against, if I am not mistaken, why did I forget the team that they are playing? They are playing the Pacers, that's right. And the Celtics lost pretty badly to the Pacers. Well, it wasn't a bad loss in terms of score differential, but it was a bad loss in the fact that you're playing the Pacers and you should be winning that game. And the Celtics lost that last Monday. And so we're looking for a bounce-back win, especially after the loss against the Pistons, and, taking advantage of these bad teams. So we'll have an instant reaction after that. We'll have instant reactions on Friday and Saturday night as well, with a podcast episode in between, a full-length podcast episode, talking about, some of these recent trends in the Celtics and across the NBA. Until next time, go Celtics.